Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm Mark from Mix It Studios. Today I want to talk about control surfaces and whether or not you need them in your studio. The short answer to this question is kind of a no. I don't really think control surfaces, considering how much most of them cost, are really worth the investment. I think in most cases there's better places you could spend your money on. Unless you're already at the point where you have pretty much everything you need gear-wise, then sure, if you've got the money to invest and you think it would help you with your workflow, then go for it. And at the end of the day, it's your money and your decision. You know, if you feel like it's going to help you work better. In my case, I built a whole workstation around my control surfaces. So I have the Icon Qcon, the original models, the Icon Qcon Pro, one of the main units and two of the extender units. And I built my whole desk around the workflow of those control surfaces. Admittedly, before actually buying them and using them, just doing a lot of research online and stuff. But yeah, I thought for me, you know, I feel like if I'm sat in front of a workstation and I feel like, I don't know, it just makes me feel more inspired and more inclined to feel creative and work well and be productive. But to be honest, a lot of the time I actually won't use half the features on them. In some cases, if I'm doing quite a simple mix session or I'm just doing a bit of recording, I won't necessarily even turn them on as I just don't see the point. I think as well, if you are running just primarily a mixing suite or an editing suite, something like that, then control surfaces can be a worthwhile investment. Again, you know, if it's something that helps you speed up your workflow and feel more inspired and creative. I will say as well that depending on what DAW you're using, if you're using Pro Tools like me, then Pro Tools, really, unless you're going to invest in some of the Avid interfaces, because Avid are very sort of keen on you using their own hardware, their EUCON protocol is locked down to their hardware control surfaces, the Avid Artist Series and the other bigger consoles they do. And they can be great, but even those control surfaces, they have their limitations. And I don't know, I really feel that touchscreen control setups like the Slate Raven is really where things are headed, because I think a lot of us just want complete control over our DAW and our plugins and everything we can do in our software. But exactly as it is, as we see it on the screen, particularly in the case of plugin control, you know, there's a lot of variable GUIs there where we want to be able to have control over it as it is on screen, whereas when you're trying to map, you know, lots of variable controls to one bit of hardware, it can quickly get a bit messy and a bit convoluted, and often in a lot of cases will just have you reaching for that mouse again because it's quicker to do so. And I will show you around in a second my Icon Qcon surfaces, show you some of the benefits and how they've kind of helped speed up and, you know, improve my workflow. And I'll also show you some of the drawbacks, particularly running under Pro Tools, as like I say, Avid control surfaces are really where you want to go if you are using Pro Tools. As I've kind of found out over the course of the years that I've had these maybe 4 or 5 years now. And yeah, the HUI protocol, which is the only protocol which is open to third-party interfaces within Pro Tools, it's just quite feature limited and quite lazily integrated. It's not terrible, and if all you really want is basic fader control and transport control, then it could well be the way to go. So with that said, let's change over shot and we'll move in and have a look in Pro Tools, and I'll show you around these control surfaces and we can see what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, and leave a comment as well. Let me know what you thought. If you've got any thoughts on control surfaces, what your experiences are yourself, if you own or have used any. So yeah, let's hop on over to Pro Tools and the Icon control surfaces. So now we're in Pro Tools and you can see the Icon
control surfaces. I tried to set the camera up so I could get the best view possible, but it's a bit hard to capture that well, especially without multiple cameras, but hopefully you can see clearly enough, and I'll explain what I'm doing, which buttons I'm pressing and so on. This isn't going to be a full-on tutorial of these. This is more just really to show you in general how the HUI protocol works in Pro Tools with control surfaces, and in general how control surfaces might be of use to you and where the downsides can often be. First thing straight away is that this channel here is my master fader, and you can see that if I switch to, so you have your mix and edit shortcut keys here, which is pretty useful. You can switch between those windows, although I'm on a dual monitor setup, so generally speaking I don't need to use those because I have both the mix and edit window up at the same time. But yeah, you can see my master fader going up and down here, and that is on this last fader, even though I actually have a dedicated master fader channel here, but it won't do anything under the HUI protocol, and that is not just on these control surfaces, that is on any control surface that is using the HUI protocol in Pro Tools. It just won't work. It's a limitation of the HUI protocol, as the original HUI control surface didn't have a dedicated master fader, and it just assigned itself to the next available fader. I think it's also part of how Pro Tools works, with it not having, you know, you have to manually create a master fader. That might be something to do with it as well. You know, fader movement is pretty good, pretty responsive, pretty snappy. There's not, you know, a massive amount of lag or anything. The faders feel very nice on this. Automation is also good as well. I'll show you that in a second. But for now, so you've got your record arm, which I can't do at the moment because I am recording my vocal. But yeah, you've got your solo buttons as well, and your mute, so all your channel strip stuff, your pan pots, which I do find that these are, I think I maybe just need to adjust the sensitivity on these, or maybe just give them a clean with some contact cleaner or something like that. But yeah, there is in the like software that you get for the firmware for these, you can adjust sensitivity settings, and I had a problem at one point which happened over time on one of my extender units where one of the faders started being a bit jumpy. I just went in and adjusted the sensitivity settings, and then it was fine, and it works just fine now. I've not had any issues with it. I think it might be the same for these pan pots. I just need to recalibrate them again, because some of them feel a little bit, they're a little bit, you can see they're a little bit jumpy, a little bit unresponsive, but I don't remember them being like that when I first got these. I don't tend to use them, the pan pots, a lot of the time, to be honest, because they just don't feel that great. They're kind of notched, and they feel kind of clicky, and I don't really like that. And the travel on them just seems a bit too long. I know that might seem like a bit of a strange thing to say, but it feels like you have to turn them too much to get them where you want to be. Again, that might be a sensitivity thing, so I need to definitely look into that. You've got your channel select, that's there for all your channels, and then your banking, which, because I don't have more than 8 channels set up right now, it's not going to do anything. But if I had extra, particularly if you're just using the one surface, you can bank between when you've got more than 8 channels going on. I can have up to 24, obviously, with my 2 extender units. And then you have individual channel banking, which actually is really useful, because annoyingly one of the big limitations with these, again, is with the extender units with the HUI protocol. It just doesn't really work very well with the extender units, and I probably would have thought twice about getting these if I'd known that at the time. It is super useful still having those extra faders up all the time when I'm working on busy mixes, but one of the things that you can't do is you can't control certain parameters So you can't do any kind of fader flip with sends on faders on the extender units. It won't work. You can't do any plug-in control of the extender units. Again, that won't work. So stuff like that you can't do on the extender unit. So I end up banking and just shifting through channels so I can get the one down to where I want on my main unit, and then I can adjust it there, doing whatever I want to with, you know, plugins or automation. I don't actually use the plugin settings tool on these because it's just quicker and easier to use a mouse. If I set a plugin up here, I've got Waves REQ on this second channel. So if I go to plugin, and then you can, well, you may well not be able to see, but on the channel strip up here, it comes up saying the inserts 1 to 4 that I've got on that channel. You can bank between those. I can't actually remember how you do that. I think it's one of the encoders here. Again, this is where you have multiple functions mapping to more than one hardware control, where stuff isn't necessarily labeled, so you really have to learn it and remember certain things, and the integration can be a bit clunky because it's not really necessarily designed to do that function that well. But yeah, if I select REQ here, so on my first 4 slots, they'll come up on the first 4 encoders here. The scribble strips won't come up in line, unfortunately. I think that's to do with character spacing, so that makes it kind of clunky and not very intuitive to use. But if I push the first encoder in here, it comes up with my plugin parameters. So again, it's like nothing really lines up that well, and you've got all the parameters, you know, bunched into this tiny little channel strip screen. So yeah, it's not very useful for me. It's much easier just to do it on the screen. But yeah, if let's turn up the gain to band 1, and then if I push it, yeah, if I push the encoder in, it's gonna, it's on a low cut, but it's engaging that low cut, and then I can adjust the frequency. But I've got my second encoder here, and it kind of lines up with where the frequency is, but it's also in line with this third encoder, which is actually doing the Q, which is then right across here, so not in line with that encoder at all. It's actually, the Q is in line with the 4th and 5th encoder. So none of it's that useful or that visual. Some people might get along with it okay. I just don't. So yeah, I don't love that about it. Really, all I use this for is basic transport control and fader control. Automation is pretty cool as well. That's quite nice. So you have your read, write, touch and latch buttons over here. If I were to hit right, then that would engage that automation mode, and then I could write in on my channel fader in real time, so you can ride it, which is quite nice. And these faders are sensitive enough where you can make those subtle kind of adjustments, so you can sort of feel the music a bit more. And it does make that more intuitive, so I do like that about it. You have a jog wheel here, which doesn't work how you would think it would work in Pro Tools. I think again because of the Huey, it doesn't just like act as your transport, like your edit window marker, where it will scroll through your audio. Instead, you have to hit the scrub button, and then you can use the scrub tool, and you can kind of scrub through your track that way. But unless you actually want to scrub the audio, it's a bit annoying of a way of using it. And then you have your zoom, which again never, so if you engage the zoom button, then your left and right is going to zoom in and out, and that's fine. Your up and down is going to change the size of the waveform, and that's good as well. That would do what you want it to. If you turn it off, then like the left and right kind of scrolls through your track window, and up and down doesn't scroll up and down, I don't think. Anyway, it just doesn't really work how you would expect it to. So it's kind of useful. I do use it a lot for the zoom functions, and that's great. That's nice to have. You've got all your record, stop, play, and so on, your loop, your rewind and fast forward, so your transport controls here. That is awesome to have. And then your other transport functions, so you've got save and undo, enter, and your punch functions. So for punching in and out, you can set those markers up, which is again really useful, very quick and easy to do that way. Your fader flip mode, so if I had any bus assignments right now, flipping will bring up my bus assignments, and then I can select which bus send I want and then send to there. That would be really, really useful if it worked on the extender units as well, but it doesn't. So a lot of the time I just don't, I find myself not using it that much, because not having it on the extenders as well kind of kills it for me. So yeah, there's a lot that's good about these, and just having this set up in front of me feels very nice. It feels like I'm at an actual console, but whether or not that is worth, I spent buying these new at the time I bought them. This was, I think, around £500 for the main unit, or 550, something like that. I got the extender units, I think I got both of them secondhand. I might have bought one new, but I got one secondhand for maybe around 250 at the time. You could probably get all of this cheaper now, and I would recommend going for the more current models. They're not that different, but they do look a bit nicer. They're all in black. The design's a bit nicer. These, when they get kind of dirty with like fingerprints and stuff, the sort of matte finish on them, they're quite hard to clean. So yeah, they just get kind of dirtied up with, you can see fingerprints all over them and stuff. Yeah, and then on the channel script area here, you have this transport time code section as well. That's quite useful to have. But yeah, the screen, it's just sort of covered with a thin piece of plastic, so this could get damaged really easily, and it actually did on this main unit when one time when I moved my setup to another place, and it got a bit scratched up and nearly, kind of punctured this. I can actually kind of sort of push it in slightly with my finger, so that doesn't feel too great. But generally the build quality is pretty good on this. I do like it. And you have integrated functions with, there was an audio interface they made for these, which you could use. It actually slots into the back somewhere. There's a cover that you unscrew them, and it sort of attaches to the main control surface here. And then you have some headphone controls at the front of the unit here. I think two headphone outputs, and then your volume dials if you were using it with the interface. I don't even know if you can get those anymore. I don't think they did especially well, and I think they were quite limited on I/O and stuff like that, so it wouldn't have been anything that would be useful for me. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it's a tough one. Like, if you have the money to spare, then I think it is worth it. But I think in a lot of cases, if you could spend the money on, say, extra preamps, extra microphones, extra outboard, or even extra plugins, anything that is actually going to affect your audio quality and help you record better or mix better or whatever you're doing, master better, then probably your money's better spent there. And the stuff you need to buy like that never kind of ends. There's always going to be stuff you'll want to get. Obviously you do get to a point where you primarily got what you need to work, and then I think if you're at that point, then by that point it might be worth it if you really feel it is going to make a big difference to your workflow and look nice in your studio and everything, which sounds silly whether it's worth paying over £1,000 for something to look nice, but I do think that's kind of important, and clients like it, it impresses them, and I like it, it impresses me still, especially how I built this desk. Even though I didn't build the desk amazingly well or anything like that, it still feels like a nice workstation to me, and it feels more impressive than just sitting at a standard computer desk. So I do like that about it. Yeah, I think if I were to do all of this all over again, I would probably build a workstation style desk like this, but then integrate touchscreens into it and go completely touchscreen, because then I think you get that nice balance of having, you know, literal complete software control with hardware, where you can control anything exactly as you would in the software, because you are literally controlling the software one to one. But you have that level of tactile control, which, yes, is not the same as, you know, putting your hand on an actual, or putting your finger on an actual physical fader. But for me anyway, like you, I mean, I use touchscreens all the time in live sound and stuff, where, you know, especially if I'm have to mix on an iPad for whatever reason, then I'm pretty used to it. It doesn't really bother me that much. It's not quite as tactile, but it still feels like you have that hands-on control and that you're not just sitting there with a mouse, which can be a bit, you know, a bit cumbersome. And because I have problems with RSI and stuff, so it's nice to kind of keep my hands moving about a bit more. So yeah, anyway, this was just kind of a bunch of random thoughts on my setup. Hopefully give you some insight if you don't have a control surface yet and you're interested in investing in one, or you're thinking about it. Then this is my experience with them, and ultimately my answer is, you know, as to whether you need one, is that it really depends. There's no yes or no answer really, although I think largely it would sway more towards a no, unless you've really got the money. And, you know, if you've just got your home studio, you're probably still at a point where you're better off spending the money on other audio equipment, stuff that will actually affect your audio quality. I know when I got these, I probably would have been better served buying other stuff, but I bought them anyway, and you know, they've worked all right for me. They definitely have done most of what I wanted them to do, but there's just a few too many caveats for me, a few too many setbacks with the integration of the HUI protocol in Pro Tools and stuff. I know these fare a bit better in Logic and other DAWs, but they're still not amazing. You know, plugin integration and stuff is never going to be that great on these, just because of how it works. It being on the small scribble strip here, that's not as useful as actually seeing the plugin GUIs on your computer screen. But anyway, I hope you guys found this useful, and yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe and all of that, and I will see you guys again in the next one.